The conference room fell silent when I announced my transition to the sales team. I'd been working as a data analyst at Creston Solutions for 4 years, quietly crunching numbers in my cubicle while dreaming of something more challenging. When the opportunity arose to join sales, I'd applied secretly, never expecting to actually get the position. My manager Victor leaned back in his chair, a smirk spreading across his face. "You're joking, right?" His voice carried across the room, ensuring everyone heard. "You? In sales? You barely speak in meetings. How exactly do you plan to convince clients to buy anything when you can't even make eye contact during presentations?" The team erupted in laughter, uncomfortable chuckles mixed with genuine amusement at my expense. My face burned with humiliation as I stood there, my prepared announcement dying in my throat. "Sales requires charisma, confidence, and the ability to command a room," Victor continued, clearly enjoying himself. "You're too shy for a career in sales. You'll be back at your desk within a month, trust me." I wanted to defend myself, to explain that I had skills that could translate to sales success. But the words wouldn't come, trapped behind the same shyness Victor was mocking. Instead, I simply nodded and walked out, their laughter following me down the hallway. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by sales books I'd ordered weeks earlier. Victor's words echoed in my head, mixing with years of similar dismissals from teachers, colleagues, and even family members who'd always seen my quiet nature as a weakness. But something different burned inside me this time. Not defeat. Determination. I opened the first book and started reading, making notes in a journal I'd bought specifically for this purpose. The pages filled with techniques, strategies, and psychological principles behind successful selling. I learned about active listening, building rapport, and the importance of understanding client needs before pushing products. The next morning, I woke at 5 a.m. and practiced my pitch in front of the bathroom mirror. My voice was shaky, my eye contact with my own reflection wavering. It was pathetic, but I did it again. And again. Every morning before work, every evening after dinner. I recorded myself on my phone and watched the videos back, cringing at my awkward pauses and nervous gestures. Slowly, painfully, I started improving. The shake in my voice became less pronounced. My posture straightened. I was still quiet, still introverted, but I was becoming something new, something stronger. 3 weeks into my sales role, I closed my first deal. It wasn't big, just a small software package for a local accounting firm, but the feeling of hearing yes after my pitch was indescribable. The client, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, had actually complimented my approach. "You're not like other salespeople," she'd said. "You actually listened to what I needed instead of just talking at me." I walked back into the office that afternoon with a signed contract, expecting some acknowledgement of my first sale. Victor glanced at the paperwork, shrugged, and turned back to his computer. "Beginner's luck. Let's see if you can do it again." The team followed his lead, offering nothing more than indifferent nods. But I didn't need their validation anymore. Patricia's words had revealed something important. My quiet nature, the very thing Victor mocked, had made the client comfortable. She trusted me because I wasn't aggressive or pushy. I was learning that the skills I thought were weaknesses, patience, listening, thoughtfulness, were actually powerful assets in sales. I just needed to learn how to leverage them properly. That night, I studied even harder, focusing specifically on relationship-based selling techniques. Despite my early success, the team remained skeptical. Victor made a point of assigning me the most difficult leads, clients who'd already rejected multiple pitches from more experienced salespeople. "Since you're so talented," he'd say sarcastically, "you should have no problem with these." The other team members watched with barely concealed amusement, waiting for me to fail. Coffee breaks became uncomfortable, conversations dying when I approached. I heard whispers about how long I'd last before crawling back to my analyst position. But I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me struggle emotionally. Instead, I channeled every slight, every dismissive comment, every mocking glance into fuel for my determination. I stayed late, arrived early, and worked harder than anyone else on the team. My second sale came 3 weeks after the first, slightly larger. Then a third, 2 weeks later. Each one built my confidence incrementally, though none were significant enough to earn respect from Victor or the team. I needed something bigger, something undeniable, to prove that my success wasn't just luck. I needed a deal that would shut them all up permanently. Over the following months, I developed a sales approach unlike anyone else on the team. While they relied on aggressive tactics and high-pressure closes, I focused entirely on building relationships and understanding client needs. I asked questions more than I pitched, listened more than I talked, and followed up with personalized information that addressed specific concerns. Slowly, my client base grew. People who'd rejected other salespeople agreed to meet with me, curious about my different approach. They appreciated that I didn't push them toward decisions they weren't ready to make. My conversion rate on initial meetings was lower than the team average, but my close rate on interested clients was significantly higher. Victor noticed my growing success and became increasingly dismissive. "You're just cherry-picking easy clients," he insisted during a team meeting. "Wait until you face real competition. Your shy little act won't work then." I wanted to point out that my clients were the same difficult leads he'd assigned me, the ones other salespeople had failed with. But I stayed quiet, knowing that arguing would accomplish nothing. Instead, I focused on making my next sale even bigger. The opportunity came when word spread through the office about Harrison Enterprises. Harrison Enterprises was legendary in our industry. They were one of the largest potential clients in the region, with a technology budget that could transform any company's quarterly numbers. But they were also notoriously impossible to close. Every salesperson at Creston Solutions had attempted to win their business over the past 5 years. Every single one had failed. The company's procurement director was famous for rejecting pitches within the first 10 minutes, regardless of how good the presentation was. When news came that Harrison Enterprises was considering new proposals, the entire sales team mobilized. Victor claimed the lead immediately, confident that his experience and charisma would finally crack the account. Other senior salespeople positioned themselves as backups, ready to step in if Victor's approach failed. Nobody considered me a competitor for this opportunity. I was still the quiet analyst who'd stumbled into sales, surviving on small deals and lucky breaks. But something about Harrison Enterprises called to me. I started researching them obsessively, learning everything I could about their business challenges, their corporate culture, and their previous objections to our proposals. What I discovered gave me hope. Every failed pitch had been aggressive, pushing products rather than solving problems. Maybe what Harrison Enterprises needed wasn't another smooth talker. Maybe they needed someone who would actually listen. I spent 3 weeks preparing my pitch for Harrison Enterprises. While Victor and the other salespeople crafted flashy presentations full of statistics and promises, I took a completely different approach. I studied Harrison's recent public statements, their industry challenges, and their competitor strategies. I identified specific problems our software could solve and built my entire proposal around those solutions. The night before my scheduled meeting, I practiced until midnight. My pitch wasn't about Creston Solutions or our products. It was about Harrison Enterprises and their needs. I tailored every word to address their specific situation, anticipating objections and preparing thoughtful responses. Victor laughed when he heard I'd secured a meeting. "You're wasting everyone's time," he said. "Harrison has rejected better salespeople than you'll ever be. But go ahead, embarrass yourself. Maybe it'll finally convince you to go back to spreadsheets where you belong." I didn't respond to his mockery. Instead, I walked into that meeting room the next morning with quiet confidence, my hands steady despite the pressure. The procurement director, a stern woman named Victoria Hartwell, sat across from me with arms crossed and an expression that suggested she'd already decided to reject whatever I was about to say. My pitch lasted 45 minutes. I didn't use a single PowerPoint slide, didn't recite memorized statistics, didn't employ any of the aggressive tactics I'd watched other salespeople use. Instead, I asked questions. I listened. I took notes on Victoria's responses and adjusted my approach based on what she revealed. By the end, something had shifted in the room. Victoria's crossed arms had relaxed. Her skeptical expression had softened into something resembling interest. She didn't commit to anything, but she asked for additional materials and suggested a follow-up meeting in 2 weeks. I walked out of that meeting feeling cautiously optimistic, but the days that followed were agonizing. No feedback came from Harrison Enterprises. Victor and the team assumed my silence meant failure, their knowing looks confirming what they'd predicted all along. "Told you," Victor said during a team meeting. "Harrison doesn't waste time with amateurs. They've probably already deleted your proposal." But I refused to accept defeat. I sent Victoria a carefully crafted follow-up email, not pushing for a decision but offering additional insights about industry trends I thought might interest her. Then I waited, checking my inbox obsessively while trying to maintain my composure in front of colleagues who were already celebrating my presumed failure. The unexpected help came from someone I'd barely noticed during my time at Creston Solutions. Bernard was a senior account manager in his late 60s who'd been with the company for over 30 years. He rarely spoke in meetings and seemed to exist on the periphery of office life, content to manage his existing clients without chasing new business. He found me in the break room one evening, long after everyone else had gone home. "I've been watching your approach," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "You're doing something different than the others, and it's working. But you're missing a few pieces." Over the next hour, Bernard shared insights from decades of sales experience. He taught me about handling objections without becoming defensive, about the importance of patience in complex negotiations, and about trusting my instincts even when others doubted my methods. "Your quiet nature isn't a weakness," he said. "It's your greatest strength. People trust those who listen more than those who talk. You make clients feel heard, and that's rare in this industry." His words gave me the confidence boost I desperately needed. I returned to my follow-up strategy with Harrison Enterprises, armed with Bernard's wisdom and renewed determination. 2 weeks after my initial pitch, Victoria Hartwell sent a brief email declining our proposal. The words hit like a physical blow. I'd invested so much hope in this opportunity, convinced that my different approach would finally yield results. Victor's mockery intensified when word spread about the rejection. "What did I tell you?" he announced to the team. "Some people just aren't cut out for sales. Maybe now she'll finally accept reality." But Bernard's advice echoed in my head. Rejection isn't defeat unless you let it be. The best sales happen after the first no. I continued engaging with Harrison Enterprises, but differently. Instead of pushing for another meeting, I sent Victoria valuable industry reports and trend analyses that related to challenges she'd mentioned during our conversation. I asked nothing in return, simply offering useful information that demonstrated my understanding of her business. Weeks passed. My colleagues wrote off Harrison Enterprises as another failed lead. But I kept sending those emails, kept providing value without expectation. It felt strange, investing time in a client who'd already rejected me. But something in my gut told me this approach was right. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after the initial rejection. Victoria Hartwell's email appeared in my inbox at 7:23 a.m. "I've been impressed by your persistence and the quality of information you've provided. Our situation has changed, and I'd like to discuss a revised proposal. Are you available for a meeting this week?" My hands trembled as I typed my response, agreeing to meet Thursday afternoon. This was it. The opportunity I'd been working toward for months. The chance to prove that my approach could succeed where others had failed. I spent the next 2 days preparing obsessively. I reviewed every piece of correspondence, every insight I'd gathered about Harrison Enterprises, every lesson Bernard had taught me. This meeting couldn't be like the first one. I needed to address whatever concerns had caused their initial rejection while demonstrating that I understood their evolving needs. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. Victor's mocking words mixed with my own self-doubt, creating a chorus of negativity that threatened to undermine my confidence. But I remembered Patricia's compliment about my listening skills, Bernard's encouragement about my quiet strength, and every small victory that had brought me to this moment. I could do this. I had to believe that I could do this. The second meeting with Victoria Hartwell was different from the first. She was more open, more willing to share specific challenges Harrison Enterprises was facing. Their previous software vendor had failed to deliver promised results, leaving them frustrated and skeptical of new proposals. I listened carefully to every concern she raised, taking detailed notes and asking clarifying questions. Then, instead of launching into a standard pitch, I offered a completely revised proposal that addressed each specific problem she'd mentioned. The approach was risky. I was essentially admitting that my initial proposal had missed the mark, something most salespeople would never do. But Victoria appreciated the honesty. "You actually heard what I said in our first meeting," she observed, surprise evident in her voice. "Most salespeople just keep pushing the same pitch regardless of feedback." We talked for 3 hours, longer than any sales meeting I'd ever conducted. By the end, Victoria agreed to move forward with a pilot program. It wasn't a full commitment, but it was progress. Real, tangible progress toward the biggest deal of my career. Walking out of Harrison Enterprises that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope that I might actually pull this off. The pilot program negotiations stretched over several weeks. Every time we seemed close to finalizing terms, new concerns emerged. Harrison Enterprises was cautious, having been burned by previous vendors who'd overpromised and underdelivered. I understood their hesitation and never pushed them toward decisions they weren't ready to make. One Friday afternoon, Victoria called with troubling news. Their legal team had raised concerns about some contract terms. If we couldn't address them satisfactorily, the entire deal might fall apart. I felt panic rising in my chest, but forced myself to stay calm. "Walk me through their specific concerns," I said. "Let's see if we can find solutions together." For the next 2 hours, we worked through each objection. Some required simple clarifications. Others needed creative problem-solving to satisfy both parties. I involved our legal team when necessary, but maintained control of the conversation, ensuring that solutions always prioritized Harrison's needs. By the end of the call, we'd resolved every concern. Victoria sounded genuinely impressed by my patience and collaborative approach. Most salespeople would have gotten defensive or tried to pressure us into accepting unfavorable terms, she said. "You actually worked with us to find real solutions. That's refreshing." The deal was still alive. Barely, but alive. The contract was signed on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. Victoria Hartwell called personally to confirm that Harrison Enterprises had approved the full partnership, not just the pilot program. They were committing to a 3-year agreement worth more than any deal Creston Solutions had closed in the past 2 years. I sat at my desk for several minutes after the call, unable to process what had just happened. The quiet analyst who'd been told she was too shy for sales had just landed the biggest client in company history. News spread through the office within hours. Colleagues who'd ignored me for months suddenly wanted to hear how I'd done it. People who'd laughed at Victor's mockery now offered congratulations that ranged from genuine to forced. Victor himself was conspicuously silent, his usual swagger replaced by tight-lipped acknowledgement that I'd succeeded where everyone, including him, had failed. The company's executive team called a special meeting to discuss the Harrison deal. For the first time since joining sales, I walked into a conference room as something other than the quiet analyst who didn't belong. I walked in as the person who'd achieved what everyone said was impossible. The public announcement came during the company's monthly all-hands meeting. The CEO himself took the stage to celebrate the Harrison Enterprises deal, calling it a transformative partnership that will shape Creston Solutions' future for years to come. Then he invited me to stand, publicly crediting me with securing the account. The applause was overwhelming. Colleagues who dismissed me for months were now forced to acknowledge my success in front of the entire company. I caught Victor's expression from across the room, a mixture of disbelief and barely concealed resentment that told me everything I needed to know. After the meeting, executives I'd never spoken to introduced themselves and asked about my sales approach. They wanted to understand how someone so quiet had succeeded where their most aggressive salespeople had failed. I explained my focus on relationship building and listening, watching their expressions shift from curiosity to genuine interest. The Harrison deal wasn't just a personal victory. It was validation of an entirely different approach to sales, proof that charisma and aggression weren't the only paths to success. My quiet determination had achieved what others couldn't, and the company was finally starting to recognize the value of what I brought to the table. 2 weeks after the Harrison announcement, I was called into the executive conference room for a private meeting. The head of sales, a woman named Catherine who'd largely ignored me until now, sat across from me with paperwork spread across the table. "We're promoting you to senior sales executive," she said. "You'll be leading a small team focused on enterprise accounts. The Harrison deal proved that your approach works, and we want you to teach it to others." The promotion came with a significant salary increase and my own office, a far cry from the cubicle I'd occupied as an analyst. But more importantly, it represented official recognition that my quiet approach had value, that being shy didn't disqualify me from success in sales. Victor's reaction to my promotion was predictable. He'd been with the company longer, had more experience, and believed he deserved advancement more than I did. His resentment manifested in subtle undermining, questioning my decisions in meetings and suggesting to colleagues that my success was a fluke. But his influence was waning. The Harrison deal had shifted the power dynamic, and everyone knew it. I focused on building my team and developing strategies that would prove my promotion wasn't a mistake. Leading a team was different from individual sales, requiring skills I'd never had the opportunity to develop. My 4 team members came from diverse backgrounds, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. Some were naturally extroverted, others more like me in their quiet approaches. I drew on my own journey to guide them, emphasizing the importance of authenticity over imitation. "Don't try to be someone you're not," I told them during our first team meeting. "Find your own strengths and build your approach around them. Sales isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It's about understanding clients and solving their problems." The team responded to my leadership style, appreciating that I didn't demand they adopt aggressive tactics that felt unnatural. Our results improved steadily, with each team member developing their own effective approach based on their individual personalities. Meanwhile, Victor struggled. His traditional methods were producing diminishing returns, and his team's performance lagged behind mine. The contrast wasn't lost on company leadership, who started questioning whether his approach was still effective in an evolving market. The power dynamic had shifted permanently, and Victor knew it. Victor's desperation manifested during a quarterly review meeting. As I presented my team's results, he interrupted with a comment designed to undermine my credibility. "Let's be honest," he said, his voice carrying across the conference room. "The Harrison deal was mostly luck. The client was ready to buy, and anyone could have closed them. She just happened to be in the right place at the right time." The room went silent. Executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. My team members looked to me, waiting to see how I'd respond to his public attack. I took a deep breath, channeling the calm confidence I'd developed over months of proving myself. "Actually, Victor, Harrison Enterprises had rejected every other proposal from our company for 5 years. They specifically chose to work with me because my approach was different from what they'd experienced before. The luck you're referring to is 6 months of relationship building and problem solving after their initial rejection. I had documentation to back up every word, a detailed timeline of my interactions with Harrison that showed exactly how much work had gone into the deal." Victor had nothing to say in response. The executives nodded approvingly, and we moved on to the next agenda item. The confrontation marked a turning point in our professional relationship. 6 months after my promotion, I was invited to speak at the company's annual meeting. The presentation would go before the entire organization. Hundreds of employees gathered to hear about successful strategies and future directions. The topic they wanted me to address: how introverts can succeed in traditionally extroverted fields. I prepared for weeks, wanting my first major public presentation to be perfect. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who'd been told she was too shy for sales was now being asked to speak to hundreds of people about turning that supposed weakness into strength. The day of the presentation, my nerves almost overwhelmed me. Standing backstage, I could hear the crowd settling into their seats, their chatter a reminder of how many people would be watching me. For a moment, I considered backing out, claiming illness, anything to avoid the spotlight. Then I remember Victoria Hartwell's surprised expression when I'd actually listened to her concerns. I remembered Patricia's compliment about my different approach. I remembered every small victory that had led to this moment. I walked onto that stage and delivered the best presentation of my life, sharing my journey from mocked analyst to successful sales leader. The applause when I finished was the loudest I'd ever heard. The speech at the annual meeting attracted attention beyond Creston Solutions. A recording was shared on industry forums and professional networks, resonating with introverts who'd faced similar mockery in their careers. Within weeks, I received invitations to speak at sales conferences and corporate training events. The National Sales Summit invited me as a keynote speaker, an honor typically reserved for industry veterans with decades of experience. My story, from dismissed analyst to record-breaking dealmaker, had become an inspiration for others who'd been told they didn't fit the traditional sales mold. Speaking at the summit was terrifying and exhilarating. Thousands of sales professionals listened as I explained how patience, listening, and authentic relationship building could outperform aggressive tactics. The response was overwhelming, with attendees approaching me afterward to share their own stories of being underestimated because of their quiet natures. Several companies reached out with speaking invitations and consulting opportunities. My success had created a platform for helping others, something I'd never imagined when I was sitting alone in my apartment studying sales books and practicing pitches in front of my bathroom mirror. Victor's decline accelerated as my star rose. Unable to accept that someone he dismissed as too shy for sales had surpassed him professionally, he became increasingly aggressive in his attempts to undermine me. His latest move was attempting to poach a major client I'd been cultivating for months. I discovered his interference when the client's representative mentioned that another Creston salesperson had contacted them with a competing proposal. The timing was suspicious, coming just as I was close to finalizing the deal. Victor had clearly accessed my pipeline information and decided to sabotage my progress. Instead of confronting him directly, I focused on demonstrating my value to the client. I scheduled a meeting to address concerns Victor had apparently raised about my team's capabilities, providing concrete evidence that contradicted his claims. The client appreciated my professionalism and transparency, ultimately choosing to work with me rather than Victor. The incident was reported to company leadership, who launched an investigation into Victor's behavior. His pattern of undermining colleagues and taking credit for others' work was finally being scrutinized. The protection his seniority had provided was eroding quickly. The final confrontation came during a senior leadership meeting. Victor, facing performance reviews that threatened his position, made one last attempt to discredit me. "We're putting too much faith in someone who got lucky with one big deal," he announced. Her approach doesn't work for most clients. Traditional sales methods are still superior. I'd prepared for this moment, knowing Victor would eventually force a direct comparison. I pulled up comprehensive data comparing our team's performances over the past year. The numbers were undeniable. My team had higher close rates, better client retention, and stronger satisfaction scores. We'd generated more revenue per person than Victor's team despite having less experience. Traditional methods have their place, I said calmly, addressing the entire room rather than just Victor. But the market is evolving. Clients don't respond to aggressive tactics like they used to. They want partners who understand their needs, not salespeople who push products regardless of fit. The executives nodded, clearly convinced by the data. Victor had no response, his arguments deflating in the face of evidence. The meeting marked the end of his ability to undermine me. Company leadership had seen the truth, and his influence was effectively over. The company held an awards ceremony to recognize outstanding performers. I was named Salesperson of the Year, receiving a trophy and bonus that represented everything I'd worked toward since that humiliating day when Victor first mocked my ambitions. Standing on stage, accepting the award in front of colleagues who'd once dismissed me, felt surreal. Victor was notably absent from the celebration, having been quietly moved to a less influential role. His traditional approach had produced declining results, and leadership had finally decided to invest in newer methodologies. The irony was perfect. The person who'd publicly declared I was too shy for sales had been professionally sidelined while I stood center stage receiving the company's highest honor. But the victory wasn't about Victor or revenge. It was about proving to myself that my quiet nature wasn't a limitation. The skills I developed over a lifetime of being introverted, listening carefully, thinking before speaking, building trust through patience, these were exactly what modern sales required. My success wasn't despite my personality. It was because of it. The opportunities continued growing. A prestigious consulting firm reached out, wanting me to help them develop training programs for introverted salespeople. Several technology companies offered executive positions, recognizing that my approach could transform their sales cultures. But I had a different vision. Over coffee with Bernard, my unexpected mentor, I shared an idea I'd been developing for months. I want to start my own consulting firm, I told him, specifically focused on helping introverts succeed in sales and other traditionally extroverted fields. There are so many people out there being told they're too quiet, too shy, too different to succeed. I want to show them they're wrong. Bernard smiled, his weathered face crinkling with genuine warmth. You've already proven it's possible. Now you can help others do the same. I resigned from Creston Solutions on good terms, leaving behind a team that had learned to embrace diverse approaches to sales. The company's leadership wished me well, recognizing that my departure, while a loss for them, was the natural next step in my journey. My consulting firm launched 6 months after leaving Creston Solutions. The response exceeded every expectation. Companies across industries hired me to train their introverted employees to help quiet people find their voices without changing who they fundamentally were. Speaking engagements multiplied, taking me to conferences and corporations around the world. My story resonated because it was universal. Everyone had experienced being underestimated, being told they didn't fit some predetermined mold. My success proved that those limitations were often illusions, barriers created by others' narrow definitions of what success should look like. I received a letter from Victor 2 years after starting my firm. He'd left Creston Solutions and was struggling to find his footing in a sales landscape that had evolved beyond his traditional methods. The letter was brief, acknowledging that he'd been wrong about me and asking if I had any advice for reinventing his approach. I wrote back with genuine suggestions, feeling no need for petty revenge. His mockery had been painful, but it had also fueled a determination that transformed my life. In some strange way, I was grateful for his doubt. It had pushed me to prove something far more important than him wrong. It had pushed me to discover who I truly was and what I was truly capable of achieving. The shy analyst who'd been laughed out of a conference room had become an inspiration for others facing similar dismissals. That journey, from mockery to success, was the ultimate